What's up? John Buccigross, ESPN, and you are in the press row with my boy, Jonah.
Welcome to the press row. Behind the scenes stories from the world of sports media. Press row. Insight and interviews from around the sports world. Now here's your host, Jonah Siegel.
Welcome back in the press row. A beautiful Saturday morning here out in the city of Seattle. It is Seafair weekend. Seafair, for those of you who don't know, is one of the most overrated. I'm going to get shot for saying that. Weekends here in Seattle. The Blue Angels are in town. It's an excuse for a party, and any excuse for a party is a good excuse, but people get very excited. I digress. I am honored and humbled to be amongst hockey broadcast greatness. Anyone who's been doing anything for 28 years gets to be embedded in the Mount Rushmore of broadcast greatness. I am sitting across from, virtually, John Buccigross from ESPN, NHL. Man, you've done it all at the Worldwide Network. John, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It is fantastic to see you. It's a beautiful Saturday. I believe you're in the great state of Massachusetts. Easy
Correct.
for me to say, even on Boston Legal, where that one judge used to say it all the time. How's your summer going so far?
Good. Nice, just did the NHL draft late June. So hockey's a long season. Every year we make the finals, and every year we go to the draft. So it's a full season, and really only have about 2.5 months off till it starts again. And so doing a few sports centers here or there in the summer. But for the most part, hanging out down here in Plymouth, Massachusetts, not too far from Cape Cod, not too far from Boston, and just getting recharged for another long NHL season and looking forward to it again, actually.
Man, they keep you guys busy, right? Like the season for the players, for you guys, it's a lot. Do you feel that it's almost, there's not enough downtime now for the consumer? Like, between the Olympics, games, all the sports, like it is consumption overload.
Yeah, there's a lot. Certainly we can manage our own consumption in anything. It's hard, but if you need some discipline, and if you can maybe unplug and take a break and do other things, or maybe focus on one or two sports if you like, but it is a lot. I definitely have kind of narrowed my vision to, I watch a big game in any sport, but obviously hockey I'm consumed for 9.5 months because it's my job, but I also enjoy it. But for sure, there's a lot of pieces of pizza out there. There's a lot of so-called choices, and it can be overwhelming. It can numb you a bit, but like I said, if you pick your spots and have the sports you really, really dive into, and the other ones can just be an occasional stop in, then that's probably the way to do it these days.
So you started with the Sphere. So let me dig into that. What was your experience like at the Sphere? I've been there for a movie. I'm not sure if you saw the movie that they did there.
I didn't.
On that. What did you think of the Sphere?
Yeah, it was interesting. As I sat from our position at the NHL draft and looking across, right to left, east to west, it was just basically, and looking up, it's basically half of an NHL NBA arena, just really cut in half. But it goes way higher, hence they get 17,000 in half the arena, 20 if they use the floor. And so obviously, and then of course the gigantic screen. So people who grew up going to a museum of science or a planetarium and would watch those cool movies, or it gives you that same kind of vibe, just obviously much bigger. And in some ways, it's more impressive outside, especially at night, to see that orb and to think of who thought of doing this. My goodness! And what is their electrical bill every night, or every month, out of their direct deposit? So it's quite the ornaments from the outside, like I said, especially at night. And the draft was obviously just a static operation. To be curious to see a ball game in there. I could see doing a big tennis match in there. Obviously, they're going to do UFC. It's going to be very interesting as they obviously use their creativity looking for revenue streams. And you mentioned the movie. I guess that's there every day, depending on what your seat is. They get well over $1 million a showing, and so it's quite the place. And it really, like I said, it really is an unbelievable testament to creativity and just someone who thought of that.
So the intent is for that to be the last live and in-person draft. I would argue that there's not a whole lot of things that the NHL does better than the other leagues,
Hmm.
but the draft happens to be one of them. There isn't as much notoriety and excitement around the kids as there are with, say, the NBA and the NFL draft. And that is because not as many people know who the kids are. And you
Right.
spent a lot of time in college hockey, so you know who a lot of the kids are. But I think the draft, the way the NHL does it, is the best way. The teams at the tables, the kids coming down from the stands, like that's freaking cool. If you get drafted, that's really cool. They're there on spot. They put on the jersey. It's certainly better than the phone call, the kids sitting in a living room. That's really awesome. I think they're going to miss that. Thoughts?
Yeah, it is interesting how they kind of introduce themselves to the organization, the scouts and the GM, and sometimes a former player like they do now, Joe Thornton. That is an interesting dynamic, and it was always a little different than the other ones, where the NBA and the NFL, they're basically just the commissioner and a few people there, and maybe that's the way they do it. I heard there was some pushback, and nothing's written in stone. You can always change your mind and keep it the way it is. But maybe they can do a bit of a hybrid and have a few group of people there to kind of give that moment, and they'll still come out of the stands. The parents will still go. I'm sure there'll be that kind of that atmosphere. It's just they won't meet members of the front office, or if they do, maybe just fewer of them. So we'll see where it goes from here, and if they change their mind, because that is an interesting, a little different flavor than the other ones, and it kind of did make hockey stand out. But I get it, it's flying all those people in and putting up at a hotel, but you're probably gonna have to do that anyway. These are regional scouts. Will have to, whatever central location they're in, there'll be some people who would drive from home, but they'll have to fly other people in and put them out. Maybe not as much, but it was great to have the entire hockey community together in one place for a couple of days. That doesn't happen any other time of the year. The All-Star game is close, but still nothing like the draft, where the entire hockey community, media, new players, front office, we get to kind of mingle with them and see them out. So I think there's some value to that. So we'll see. Like I said, I don't think it's written in stone yet, but I agree that it was unique and different, which is what you're always looking for in this day and age, is something that just stands out as a little bit different.
Yeah, my understanding is that the draft itself, where the kids are, will be in a central location, but the teams are probably going to be in their home office, home rink, so to speak.
Like the NFL does, right? They have the war room and things like that. And so, and like I said, that will likely happen, but I hope maybe they change their mind and think about it, maybe have it in the Sphere every year. I don't know if that's possible, because then they have the award show the same weekend. You do it all in one shot, which is good for the NHL employees, who, again, every year their season's really 9.5 months long, almost 10 months. Middle of September they get going, and they go now pretty much till almost the middle of July with free agency. So it'd be nice to give them a break, make it easier on them, and so we'll see.
So let's take a step back for a second. You have one of the greatest Wikipedia pages I've ever seen. It's got some awesome details in there. So born in Indiana, moved to Pennsylvania before landing in, is it Steubenville, Ohio?
Yeah,
is that right?
I was actually born in downtown Pittsburgh, and lived in a little town, Indiana, Pennsylvania, where Jimmy Stewart, that was his hometown. I lived there till I was 11, then moved to Steubenville, Ohio, home of Jimmy the Greek and Dean Martin. That's an hour just over the Ohio border through the panhandle of West Virginia, just 40 minutes from Pittsburgh. My dad was a Sears store manager. So about every 7-8 years, he moved to a little bigger store. So it was Indiana, Pennsylvania. I moved there when I was like 2. Moved to Steubenville when I was.
You have great memories of that, I'm sure.
Yeah, that was, Indiana was kind of my hometown. You could ride a bike. It's a college town. Ride a bike all over town, play wiffle ball. It really was that last generation who got to live outside and play hide and go seek, and just weren't inside very much. And so that was awesome. Then moving to Ohio was difficult, because I kind of moved to a suburban, closed-in area where I didn't have that freedom just to wheel all over town. And so, but it was a very hardcore sports town, mini, little steel mill town, blue collar. And so high school there was very competitive, grade school as well in sports. And that feeded me, because I was a serious sports guy, a serious athlete, took competition serious, loved sports, and then ended up one more move in Warren, Ohio when I was in college. And that was my dad's last stop at Sears before he retired and moved back to New England, where he was born and raised in Boston. And that's why people always wonder, how'd you get into hockey? Well, my dad was a Boston guy. And so, like every American kid, I love football, basketball, and baseball. But because my dad was from hockey, and it was the early 70s, and Bobby Orr was on the Bruins, and the Bruins were winning Stanley Cups or either getting to the finals as well in 74 and 78 and 79. So I grew up around a hockey mad dad and team, and so I always knew the game, collected hockey cards, could skate, and so it was just part of me. So it turned out to be a great niche when I got to ESPN in 1996, and we see all those lines of people. I want to be involved in baseball. I want to be involved, these young aspiring broadcasters, and there's 50 people in the football line and 50 people in the basketball line and 50 people in the baseball line. Oh, look, 2 people in the hockey line. I'll go in that line. I love the other sports as much as I love hockey. I knew the history. I knew baseball players from the 1920s and 30s and 40s, but that hockey line was short, and it gave me a quick opportunity to get into ESPN, create a niche, and it served me well in my 28 years there.
It's a hell of a ride. You went to Heidelberg College?
Yep, Heidelberg College.
Majoring in communications and theater arts.
Yeah, my goal was to find a small college where I could play sports. I was recruited to play basketball, end up Division III school, tiny. End up playing a couple years of college golf my junior and senior year. But yeah, they had a little radio station, little TV station, little school newspaper. I knew at age 12, age 13, age 14, the first time I saw Sports Center, especially Chris Berman doing Sports Center, I'm like, that's what I want to do. So pick a small school where you could play sports, but also have these reps in the campus newscast and the DJ at the radio station, write for the school newspaper. And I did that for 4 years. Again, only 900 students. The way they set up the major was communication, theater arts. So it was the speech team, it was theater, and it was communications, radio, TV. And you picked one lane, and most of your classes were there, but you had to dabble in acting and speech, which was kind of smart and I don't think they no longer have that setup, but to make a speech and formulate a speech, to take acting classes, to realize television is really only performance art. And then you focus on your main, which for me was TV and was television really, but it was all communications. And so it served me well. I got a lot of reps in 4 years. I was down there all the time, up there all the time in the studio, making music videos. Took my girlfriend out to a local farm, and she would play a John Mellencamp song on her fiddle, and I would edit so it looks like she's playing it and show different shots of the rural countryside. That was really my first taste of the Midwest. The Midwest kind of begins right there. It's where it's flat pretty much from the middle of Ohio to the Colorado Rockies. And that's where that taste really appealed to me. And so, yeah, whether it was making music videos or videos of the basketball team, I would shoot maybe 7-8 games and take the best stuff and make one player's own personal music video to a song. And so I was really hyper energetic. I had lots of stamina and energy. I was a night owl, so I knew what I wanted to do. So I was very hyper focused and hyper energized.
It's interesting, like we went through a period probably pre-COVID for about 10 or 15 years, and maybe through COVID too, where those soft skills for kids were de-emphasized.
Right.
I feel like they're coming back. Both my kids are in college. One is at The Ohio State. The older is at Dion School in Colorado.
Nice.
And I feel like those soft skills, the arts, if you will, the professional arts, as I'm going to call them, communications, media studies, I think they're coming back. And learning the skills that you're talking about are actually critically important. And those jobs are actually the roles that probably aren't going to be eaten up by technology.
Yeah. The big thought is, unfortunately, now there's not as much love, adoration, and reverence for the written word. And that was something, again, as a young kid, I used to write poetry in college, and I used to read Tennyson and that amazing phrase that I just, I would memorize and memorize poems. And so the written word, I love to write. And that separated me at ESPN early on. That's how you separated yourself at Sports Center, is could you write? We had John Walsh, the great, he came from Rolling Stone. And it was, so I think even though I wasn't really great on TV, didn't have a great voice, I had a good head of hair and I could write. And so so when your contract came up, that's how you got another contract at the time. And this is the mid 90s to late 90s to early aughts is, could you write a lead-in, a Sports Center lead-in? Did it have some creativity? Did it have some not try too hard humor? Just a turn of a phrase, aphorisms? Kind of write like Elvis Costello writes a song. It's how you try to write a Sports Center lead-in. And that kind of polymath approach to life where you kind of have a wide swath of interests and somewhat knowledge as best as you can. So that's kind of gone the way of video, unfortunately. Obviously, TikTok, Instagram, Reels, and so kids obviously are more into video than they are into written word. And that's really, it's amazing how that collapsed. That's been the biggest change in media and Sports Center and ESPN, is the collapse of the written word, how it's valued, how they pay for it. And so that's been the big difference maker. So as you've gotten older, that's why I've always liked Twitter and now X, is because that really is for people who like to write and like to read. That's how I consume it. I know some people look at it as a negative, and I get it. There's stuff on there, but for me, it's been a great place to learn and to read, and that's why I use it. That's why I understand it. I think that's why I've done well on it, and as opposed to Instagram, which I still can't quite figure out. Again, that's more videos. And obviously, I grew up in the MTV age, and I grew up in the cable television. Again, I didn't get cable television until I was 13, 14. So certainly music videos and music, and obviously movies. We've always loved movies since movie pictures were invented. So I've always liked the snippets, and I like the video. But to me, it was always just, to kind of support the written word, and just as a quick piece of candy, where the written word is the full meal, the ribeye is the written word, and to tell a story and to read and to really consume it so that then you understand it. So that's the big difference maker at ESPN and sports, is the written word. Thankfully it was valued when it was, when I came up, because I probably wouldn't have been successful as otherwise.
So you go to WPRI.
That was my first break. Yeah, my first job was at Cape Cod, basically cable access news. If you got cable in the middle of Cape Cod, you got our little half-hour newscast from 5:30 to 6. And then we would record it and then play it back at 7 and 10. It was CNN headline news all day long, and then suddenly at 5 o'clock, Cape 11 News would appear. They can talk about 9 people. Teleprompter was a piece of paper. We used regular typewriters still. And but I was there for 5.5 years, making about 18 grand a year, got married, had a couple of kids in the process. And then 94, in fact, my daughter turns 30 today. At this point, I was filling in, driving to Providence on the weekend. I'd occasionally fill in. And then I got the weekend anchor job as it came open. And I started there in the fall of 94 at WPRI. That was like my first, I have to wear an earpiece. I didn't wear an earpiece my first 5 years. And the teleprompter obviously was right on the screen. And it was like, I'm going to Bill Parcells news conferences. I'm going to Fenway Park opening day, last hockey game in Boston Garden, preseason Canadiens Bruins, last Celtics game, Boston Garden, Orlando Magic and Shaq, Celtics playoff game. So I was only there for the World Figure Skating Championship, which at the time was huge because it's coming off Kerrigan and Tanya Harding. They had a local team made the Little League World Series. We thought they'd be there for a day. They ended up going to the finals. I'm in Williamsport for a week. A Frozen Four was held in Providence. I'd never been to a Frozen Four. What is this? 4 hockey teams, people wearing sweaters from schools not even here, bands inside the arena. So those 2 years were just fertile and rich in Providence, where I got all this. Sometimes I think I did more in those 2 years than I've done in 28 at ESPN in terms of events and how it was concentrated. It was a huge, it enabled me to say, okay, I can do this. And again, we would do these Patriot halftime or half-hour shows when they were just making the playoffs, and Bledsoe was there and Parcells. It was really, the Patriot popularity was really born then. And then, of course, it went to the next step with Belichick and Brady, but it really started there. They were a laughing stock before that. And we would do these half-hour shows, and we got to write all these different essays. And that's where I really, again, showed off my writing skills. And that enabled me to build a good tape to send to ESPN in 2 years. When I walked in the newsroom and saw a USA Today article, and it's a profile on this guy named Al Jaffe, and his job is to look at resume tapes, and that's what he does. And I'm like, and at this point, I'm thinking maybe in 5 years I can apply to ESPN. I'm 30. I'm just shy of 30 years old. I mean, ESPN was like going to the moon. I couldn't comprehend it. It didn't make any. It was the biggest thing in the world. It's the most successful television network of all time, sports or otherwise, the most profitable. And I didn't know that at the time, but to me, this is just, they would never hire me. So maybe 5 years I can apply. But I see this article, and that's a guy's job, and at least it's his name. Who would I send a tape to anyway? Who would see it? But maybe if I address it Al Jaffe instead of ESPN, it's just 5 minutes of your best stuff. So he can go through 20 an hour. It's not that hard. And it is a small industry. People think it's big. It's really kind of small. And so I sent it, never thought of it. And sure enough, they called 2 months later and wanted me to come down, do an all-day interview, and you do a pretend Sports Center for 15 minutes to see if you're good enough, see how you write. Again, at the time, the writing part. And boom, it happened just like that. So like in late '94, I'm making 18 grand a year with a wife and 2 kids. And then 2 years later, here comes Chris Berman coming down the hallway, say, "Hey, Bucci, how you doing? Welcome to ESPN." It was really warp speed those 2, 3 years.
So you walk into ESPN, how much of a kid in a candy store is it?
Yeah, it was something to see Charlie Steiner there and see these people who I grew up watching in college. And then obviously when I got in the business and you're keeping an eye on everything and you're watching, here comes Stuart Scott, and ESPN2 was like an expansion team. Oh, look, they hired 6 new people. In the old days, they're hiring one person a year, but they're hiring Reese Davis and Bill Pito and Stuart Scott, and kind of like this little expansion team, Susie Kolber. And okay, that's pretty cool. And then suddenly, and what I didn't even realize, again, this is why I'm just kind of a rube in the Midwest. They were starting ESPN News. CNN announced they were going to do a 24-hour sports network that had a half-hour newscast every half hour, just like CNN headline news. And so whenever you turn on, you can get up to date in half an hour. You get the whole world of sports constantly, 24 hours a day.
I remember.
ESPN wanted to beat them to the punch. So they set this goal November 1st, 1996, go on the air with ESPN News, even if it was in 12 homes, but they wanted to launch first. So this is like expansion in sports, why athletes love expansion teams, because it's 20 more jobs. Hockey, it's 60 more jobs for football, 15 for basketball. So for us, same thing, and I never, I think I read about this a little bit, say, yeah, this new network's coming, but I never thought this is my chance. I'm 30 years old. I have 8 years of experience. I'm just cheap, but I'm still cheap. And this is my chance. But I just sent that tape because I saw the article in the USA Today on somebody else's desk. If I was off that day and never saw that article, I never would have sent that tape. I didn't think I was good enough. I just happened to see a name. Okay, I can put a name. I think people are afraid to apply to jobs because who's going to see this, But at least in our business, they look at a reel, so they can really see who you are. They can't tell what kind of a salesperson you are. Now, again, they can't tell about how you are around the office and how you work with people, but at least they can see your talent on display on a resume tape. So that's why I sent it in. And like I said, so obviously it made sense. They needed to hire 10 to 12 people for this 24-hour newscast that they were going to have, network. They were going to have ESPN News. So that was my chance. And that's, as it turned out, that's why, the mid-90s corporations are buying these networks. The internet is just about coming and ready to explode, although no one really realized how huge it would be, I think. But the media was really starting to buy these networks, and Disney bought ESPN, ABC, the whole kit and caboodle from Cap Cities. They bought ABC and Disney, all the other networks they have, Disney Channel, and Disney bought that from ABC in March of that year, and then I was hired in October 28th, 1996 was my first day.
So you start at Sports Center, you do a little baseball, but clearly you've fallen into hockey. I mean, not just fallen in, like hook, line, sinker. Is that your favorite?
It is now, for sure, as it turned out. At the time, yeah, I'm doing ESPN News, and then every once in a while, you look for that schedule to come out. Do I get a Sports Center? Do I get to do a Sports Center? And so I'm there the whole month of November, whole month of December, whole month of January, and then suddenly there's a schedule change in Grammy night, February 1997. They said, you're doing the 1 a.m. Sports Center with Stuart Scott.
Wow.
My first Sports Center. And so, obviously this is a huge, like I said, this is going to the moon. And in fact, the first words I ever uttered on Sports Center, Stuart opened up the broadcast. Hi, hello, welcome in. And introducing the best new artist, because it was Grammy night. Stuart kind of did that turn of phrase, which is very clever. And the first words I say when he stopped talking was, "My eagle has landed," and meaning, of course, the landing on the moon. Yeah. And so I did the first highlight. It was a Minnesota, I think Michigan college basketball highlight, and so there it was. And then that went. And I remember standing in the parking lot, just looking up in the sky. It was like 3 a.m. because it was a 1 a.m. live on the East Coast. And then by the time you're out of there, it's 2:30, 2:45, and I'm just racing. I'm not going to go to bed anytime soon. Just renting a little apartment down the street with my wife and 2 kids, about a 2-minute ride from ESPN. And I'm just racing. I can't believe this. So now it's just waiting for that next Sports Center. There's not enough of them. And back to news. Hey, can you do baseball tonight? A little baseball tonight. And then, of course, back then we still had the hockey rights and the NHL tonight, all those ESPN2 shows, NBA tonight, NHL tonight, RPM tonight, just a half-hour daily show for your sport. And again, that was another John Walsh invention. And so come playoff time, they went 7 days a week. Bill Pito was the host during the regular season, and they needed a couple of days. He's not going to work 7 days a week for 2 months, so they had a little fill-in people. And that first time around '97, I didn't do any. And I'm sitting there watching. I'm going, geez, I really should be doing this show. Like, I know hockey. I love hockey. I got hockey cards since I was 4. I followed the sport, but I never was a good self-promoter. I never walked into an office and say, hey, I'm really good at hockey. Can I have a shot at this? And that was kind of important back then, but I just wasn't comfortable doing that. And so that first playoffs, nothing. And then again, the summer of '90, and by then, about the spring of '98, it must have come, whether doing sports centers or hearing me do highlights on news of hockey highlights, like, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I filled in then. And then then luckily Bill Pito asked off the show because he wanted to do more sports center to kind of help his career, which is smart. And so luckily the people on the show went to bat for me. So, because they realized how much I loved it, how much I was into it. And so the fall of '98, that's when I became the 5-night-a-week host of NHL Tonight with Barry Melrose 4 nights a week. Did the show by myself on Saturdays because always a lot of games, hard to get analysts in. So I used to love those shows with 13, 14 games on a Saturday night, all by myself, get my steak tips at the 99, eat my steak tips, watch the games, and then do the show. And because, again, we were rights holders. And so I did that and started writing a hockey column in 2002. I thought there was a vacuum of a pop culture young writer out there to kind of write about hockey in a different way. I felt like the main hockey writer was older and just different. And so I felt there was a space there, and man, I couldn't believe the reaction. And that column really was a sneaky part of my career. I think why I kept getting new contracts, even as we lose hockey in '04. We lose the rights for 18 years, as it turns out, 17 years. But because that column, it really became really popular all over the world because of the internet. I'm getting emails from all over the world because of the internet. And I build this hockey column and end up writing until 2017, culminating with my son's last high school hockey game. And I think, and that's kind of why hockey became big for me, because my boys started playing. I built a backyard rink in my Connecticut house. I'm hosting a hockey show. Some of my best friends are becoming former hockey players like Ray Ferraro and Barry Melrose. And so I just became immersed in the sport from a family standpoint and from a work standpoint. And that was the success of my hockey column. I wove in my personal life of hockey and being a hockey dad, a hockey parent, hockey consumer, and loving all aspects of hockey, not just the NHL. And that's what people really connected with and fed off with. And every once in a while, I'd read an article that would go viral, whether it was like, 13 new rules for new hockey parents, or like I said, my son's last game, Buccigross last game, where I just kind of emptied my soul and heart and soul right from the time he first started playing to his last high school hockey game, which is kind of a Hoosiers moment, Cinderella story. They made the Final Four, didn't win. But so that hockey column was a big part of my career, giving me a niche, showing I could write, like we talked about. And even though we lost the hockey rights, maybe ESPN thought, geez, maybe they're going to try to poach him from us because he's a hockey guy. And that probably gave me some leverage a little bit in contracts as well. Even though I was never really offered anything big on the outside, there was always that possibility. And the column and then I think helped doing that.
I think your Twitter over time helped too. I mean, you've always had an authenticity of love of the game. That's always been my impression. And that's a huge differentiator. And that there's people who cover the game or a game, and you can't really tell if it's a job or a passion or both. And when you do it as long as you've done it, and you do it, I'm going to call college the grassroots, if you will. If you do it at that level and the pros, look, you've sat with some of the greats. You sit with Barry Melrose, Ray Ferraro, Darren Pang, Steve Levy, who you're probably mad at me for calling one of the greats, but you've worked with some exceptional talent through 28 years at ESPN, the bulk of which covering hockey, which is not mainstream. There's an authenticity to your coverage. You clearly enjoy the game. And Canadians for sure always are looking for people that enjoy the game. Why? I can't explain it, but they do. But here in the States, there aren't a ton of folks who really truly enjoy the game unless you're in a border city. It comes across in your work that you love the game. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask how Barry Melrose is doing. I know that there's been some significant health issues. He's been away I assume you know. If you're able to tell us, how's Barry doing?
Yeah, well, diagnosed with Parkinson's about 3 years ago. He worked a couple years with it, and it got just too challenging. It doesn't get better, unfortunately. There is no cure. It's really sad because he was so witty and so quick-witted, and so to see, of all things, to see that mind slowly go, it's sad, And so, like I said, he had to retire after the Frozen Four in 2023 down in Florida. We did the Quinnipiac overtime winner against Minnesota. Colby Cohen, Barry, and I, and that was kind of his swan song. And he lives in St. Petersburg. So, but yeah, really sad. He's young enough where he still should be doing this. But this, of all things, for that quick mind honed in the locker rooms of professional hockey to kind of go and slowly go, it's awful. But yeah, Barry was a great friend for so many years. How he interacted with the public was certainly a great role model. I think I would have treated the public well anyway. I'm very grateful, and I'm very cheerful and friendly. I think I would have done that anyway. But to see someone of Barry's stature take every picture, sign every autograph, and just be so humble as a guy who, coached Wayne Gretzky and was the biggest hockey media star in the United States of all. No one's bigger than Barry. And so, yeah, he was a big part of, of being by my side. Barry was so good at TV. He made everybody better because he was just a natural at it. Charles Barkley always called him the best analyst. And David Faraday was a big fan. He'd always send Barry golf clubs when he had that Cobra deal. And so, yeah, it was amazing stories coaching the Kings, walking in after a game, and there's Goldie Hawn sitting on his desk, with Kurt Russell. And so, yeah, so it's really sad. It's, it's really a tough time. And then, like I said, it doesn't get better, which is the worst part.
I'll always remember the sweater, what I'm going to call the 80s hair.
Yeah.
And then as a Maple Leafs fan, just the series against the Kings where.
Yeah, that was his apex as a hockey person. Certainly winning Game 7 in Toronto with Gretzky. That's the mountaintop for Barry. They make the finals, win Game 1, and then lose in overtime on the illegal stick up by 1 late. And then, of course, they get overtime as well by Montreal. They lose in 5. But, thankfully, that eventually got him fired the next year and got him an ESPN. Otherwise, maybe I never meet him and have so many great memories with him. But, yeah, that Barry was awesome. He was part of my success early. And, yeah, you're right. Social media was a big thing for me because, again, it kind of made me create my own brand. I don't know how to create a brand. That wasn't the idea. It was just to have fun with sports. And so I start the Bucci Overtime Challenge in 2010, just a little throwaway thing that we used to play a game on the set of NHL Tonight. When a game went to overtime, throw $1 on the set. Me, Ferraro, and Melrose pick one guy each team. If your guy scores, take the other $2, pocket, show begins, because our show doesn't start till the overtime ends. So that was kind of something to kill the time. And so I just threw it on Twitter one time, and it just exploded and got bigger and bigger. I made T-shirts and hats and coasters, and I got a whole line. And I did the same thing with the college hockey thing. I kind of threw that up as a hashtag, got a little traction. Same thing, hats and T-shirts. And like you said, it's kind of that organic. And that's kind of what my column did early in the 2000s, because that was part of the aspect I left out or didn't realize, as you just mentioned, was, hockey journalists didn't talk that way. They didn't talk as fans of the game. You wonder, did they even like what they were doing? They seem to have a really morose attitude about it, just a drudgery. And it was difficult. The media liaisons they have now, which make it much easier to interview people. Players are media trained. A lot of those guys back then were animals. They were just savages off the farm, and it was tough dealing with media people. So it was hard to get stories done and written. And so maybe that's why their attitudes were sometimes what they were. But yeah, that different type of fan first attitude, and then. Same, like you mentioned, Twitter was able to really kind of capitalize on that in those years. We didn't have hockey. And then I kind of found my Sports Center footing 2010. Again, it took, 14 years. So I got a regular Sports Center shift, and that was the noon to 3 shift. And, that was kind of a new thing, daytime sports centers. That didn't happen until the late 2000s. And so I was there for well over 10 years, and we still didn't have a daytime sports center, but I got put on the noon to 3. And, all the executives and all the people going to work at ESPN, so they have ESPN on their desk as background noise or to occasionally check in. And working that 3-hour shift every day, 5 days a week for 2-3 years, I think they realized, "Whoa, that guy's pretty good. I like him." I don't think they knew I worked there for the first 14 years, and that got me on the 11 Sports Center for the 2010s. A lot with John Anderson, Stuart Scott until he passed away. I did most of his sports centers in the last couple of years of his life, and then John, and sprinkled in with some Steve Levy. Although he always had some play-by-play piece, so not as much. But so that was a big moment for my career. To get the 2010s was really all Sports Center. And then just as I'm maybe getting kind of aged up there in the mid 50s, like, oh, maybe, we start having a couple layoffs at ESPN. Maybe I'm not going to be around here too much longer. Bam, we get hockey back at just the right time. As I'm 55 years old, 56 years old. And then now I get to do play-by-play, which was always what I wanted to do. As a kid, I would turn the sound down on the TV as a 13-year-old and do play-by-play. That's what I wanted to do. Then I saw Chris Berman as a Sports Center anchor, but it was always a play-by-play, calling the games, being at the rink, being at the game. So to do that for the last 3 years now and still do some studio stuff, that it's like a whole new thing. I want to be great at it. I work at it. It's given me that whole new rejuvenation. Not many people go to a job like it's their first day of their job when you're in your 26th year, like I was. Most people had their feet up and they're throwing paper, counting down retirement. Here I was again. It was like a brand new job, but it was my same job. I didn't have to leave the company and leave my 401k and and everything. So it was, what a blessing. Right place, right time for hockey. And still have 2 years on my contract. So, 2 more years to go. Then there'll be 2 years left on our deal with the NHL. Hopefully I get another 2 years to at least get to the end of this deal. That would be perfect. And either way, from that point, it's just all gravy.
So the years that you were talking about when Melrose went to the finals,
yeah.
I was finishing college at Vermont, and I'm driving from Burlington to Montreal to Toronto to go home. It's a hot summer day. And there's a gas station just before the Montreal-Vermont border. And I pull in and there's a beautiful BMW sitting there. And I go to gas up my car, and out of the BMW pops Ray Bourque.
Wow.
I'm like, holy shit, it's Ray Bourque. Like, I'm Canadian. Like, nobody else would know who he is, but I certainly know who he is. I'm like, what do I get him to sign? So I reach into my bag because I'm moving home from college, and I had a hocky jersey. I had a Leaf jersey. I'm like, I got to get Ray Bourque to sign that. Like, what else do I got? Right.
Right. Yeah.
And he could not have been nicer.
Yeah.
And I understand you have an awesome Ray Bourque golf story.
Yeah. After he retired, he won that amazing cup in 2001 with Colorado. The following playoff in 2002, he wanted to get into a little bit of TV. I don't know if you want to try TV. ESPN probably asked him, hey, come up to Bristol, stay for a week, do some NHL Tonights, do some in-between periods. That was our first go around with hockey and playoff games on ESPN2 and ESPN. And so he came up and did that. And, one of the shows, I don't know if I was even on the show that night, might have been somebody else. And I said, hey, I heard you like to golf. If you ever want to play while you're here, kill time during the day. We don't come to work till 6 o'clock at night. We were here to watch the games. Again, there weren't afternoon sports centers for these analysts to have to do. They have these long days now. Back then it was much easier. Now they got them up at 9 a.m., 11, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And he said, oh, I'd love to play. So he came out to my place, Wampanoag Country Club in West Hartford. And it was so cool. We started playing, and he had a Titleist 77. I'll never remember that. That's so cool. Wow, yeah, Titleist hooked me up with those. And we're playing this round of golf, and we're coming around. And about the 13th, 14th hole, I think in my head, I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool, just to myself, to shoot a 77 with Ray Bourque. Now, at the time, I was a good player, probably a 1-2 handicap.
Wow.
I could shoot par at my home course, or certainly 73, 74. 77 would not be a good score for me. I'm like, but it's Ray Bourque. It's cool to do that. So we're going along, and it's, now we get to 15, we get to 16, and I am about, I'm about shooting. I'm doing okay round, but obviously I'm kind of distracted being with Ray Bourque and just having a good time hosting him. Not every round. It's occasionally I was shooting the high 70s. And so I was like, oh, how can I do this? Well, if I can par, 16 and 17, then I can go to 18, a difficult hole, and I can make a bogey on purpose because I'm 4 over now, so I'm 4 over par. And I was thinking, okay, 76, so I can just get to 18, then I can bogey that on purpose. That's fine. I can knock it on, putt it like about a foot away, and then just hit it an inch, miss on purpose, then tap it in. So sure enough, I get there and I'm 4 over par. I hit a nice drive. I put it on the green. I'm above the hole. It's a real fast green, 20-footer down the hill, and you just have to touch it. It's like a tabletop fast putting surface, Donald Ross greens. And so I just tap the ball very light. Again, the greens are fast, and any golfer knows, especially a decent golfer, sometimes you hit a putt and you're like, oh my gosh, that's in. And I'm trying to miss it. I'm trying to hit it, like halfway there, and then just hit it a foot and then tap it in. But I hit it, and I'm like, going, no, don't go in. At this point, I told Bourque what I'm trying to do. Don't go in. I'm screaming with this, don't to go in, not to go in. And sure enough, it drops right in the middle. So I go from 4, and I'm trying to I go to 3 under and shoot a 75. And I wrote a whole article about it. And then eventually the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series, which was very popular, they asked if they could use that story in their book, which was a big thrill. They gave me like $50. And And so that was kind of the lesson of the story of golf. And because at the time, Bork was really trying to, obviously losing hockey. Now he's trying to get really good at golf and almost trying too hard. And my great lesson was that, less is more. And actually, I tried to miss the putt and I made it. And a lot of times in life and in hockey, and I've always kind of had that philosophy with life anyway, like I said, about not really promoting myself. And I saw this quote in college. I'm like a man who walks down a dirt road, trips over something, reaches down to pick it up, and it's exactly what I want. I kind of live with that philosophy. I waited till I tripped over something and I wasn't even sure what I wanted or what was best for me, but that's exactly what I want at this time. And that's how I kind of looked at life. And that's why I never really self-promoted. And then with that story there, it always struck me that, I was trying to miss it and I made it. And we should do more of that in life.
Speaking of books, you wrote a book about Keith Jones.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Yeah, just, again, another guy had to retire because of a knee injury. And so he came to ESPN to try, any guys who interview well always get the first shot at TV. That's why Barry got a shot at ESPN, because he had the hair, he had the Billy Ray Cyrus mullet, he was handsome, he was kind of flamboyant. So he's going to get the first shot at ESPN doing TV to fill in and see how it goes. Same with Keith Jones. So he came up after he retired. It was the middle of the season, early in the season, when they realized he couldn't play anymore. And we get up, we walk him inside alongside Keith Jones making his TV debut. I'm John Buccigross. All right, we got the Flyers and Penguins tonight. Jonesy, what are you looking for? And he is just sweating. He is white as a ghost. And he kind of mumbles through and stumbles through. All right, back with the opening faceoff right after this. And he looks at me and he goes, that's a lot harder than it looks. When you play, you sit down, the endorphins are flying, you might have your shirt off, you're just kind of chilling, talking to reporters, and you can be funny and witty, and they can take the best 30 seconds. Here, you have a suit, makeup, bright lights. You have to say something funny and interesting in 12 seconds, go, and stop in 12 seconds. So he really struggled. But then he went back to Philly, did local radio, local Flyers, and he came back in the playoffs when, again, we need more people because we're on 7 nights a week. And he was like, oh my gosh, he's a totally different guy. The suit looked better. He nailed his analysis, and it really, and while I got to know him, he told these amazing stories. And at one point I go, Jonesy, we really should write a book. I mean, you have all these stories. All you need is 12 chapters. You have 12 stories. You just tell them to me and I'll write them out. And as we did that, this kind of like his philosophy of life of just figuring things out. This guy playing junior B hockey at 19 years old, never played major junior. And just walking in at a game once for Niagara Falls, saw a pamphlet on this table, college hockey. He looked at it and go, you know what? I'm going to get a scholarship. I'm going to play 4 years of college hockey at Western Michigan. And that's what he did. He walked down the road, stumbled over something, and it's exactly what he wanted. And he did it. He made the NHL, and he played with Peter Forsberg in Colorado, and he played with Eric Lindros in Philadelphia. And again, just a guy who just could figure things out. And so I just thought he was a great topic for a book. A local publisher happened to contact me through an email. Again, this is my hockey column. People would approach me all the time about writing books. I was like, I don't know. But this one, I said, yeah, I'll do it with you, this local publisher in Philadelphia. And we did that and had a fun. It's hard to write nonfiction books, a lot of fact checking. So it's just the first person as told to, that just to make, I've tried to put his thoughts together. So, but it was great. It was really neat. And to walk through Barnes and Nobles and to see your books in there, it's really cool. And at one point, the publisher went out of business, and because I got 500 books left. You want to buy them for 50 cents a piece? I go, yeah, sure. Throw them on my website, the Bucci website. They're all gone. So if you see them on Amazon for $120, that's because they're out of print, and there's no more of them.
That's fantastic. Are you surprised where he is now?
No, like I said, what a guy who can talk to the Zamboni driver. He can talk to the salesman. He can talk to a guy who runs a $3 billion corporation who's trying to maybe buy some advertising with the Flyers. Again, just could figure it out. Again, at the end of his career, he tears his ACL. Instead of using a cadaver, they use his patellar tendon that goes north-south right down your kneecap. They take out the middle third, use that as your ACL, and then your patellar tendon grows back. Well, as it turned out, after a couple of years, his knee is killing him. And they're like, Jonesy, your ACL is fine. It's fixed. He couldn't jog across the street. He was afraid he was going to get hit by a car. That's how bad, he literally couldn't run. But with hockey, he taped it up, braced it up, and gerrymandered it together. They would figure a way to get around the ice, get in front of the net. He could only turn one way, couldn't turn the other way. Again, this is Jones figuring life out. And what happened was his patellar tendon didn't grow back, the middle third, but they couldn't see that until about the 10th doctor. And the doctor said, "You like golf?" He goes, "What do you mean?" Because you're done playing hockey. And
Oh
that's
my
when he
God.
came. And that's when he came to ESPN like a month later to try television. But the Flyers were great. They paid him the rest of his contract and then employed him. And so he showed great loyalty to them. They showed great loyalty to him. And then, so when the presidency came up, you realize what that job is. It really is setting culture, setting tone. You have a GM to make trades. You have scouts to draft, the players at the draft. This league. You've been a broadcaster for 15 years. You've played. You're up close. You see players. You see their personalities, how they react on the bench. He's between the glass there for TNT and NBC and in the studio. So, no, he's a people person. He knows people, and that's what that job as president. He's not president of the business side. He's not trying to figure out stuff like that. He's the president of hockey operations, and he knows how to bring people together. He empowers people. He makes them feel bigger than they are, the way he talks to you. And, he has that gift.
Speaking of gifts, you got to spend a lot of time with Stuart Scott. You've talked about him a few times.
Yeah.
What's your favorite memory of him that perhaps we haven't heard?
Yeah, again, for me, it's just that first sports center, how welcoming. I remember walking across campus when I just gotten the job there, and I saw him walk across the ESPN campus. That's what we called it. It's almost like a small college, and it kept growing. Like I tell people, until our first layoffs, there was not a day there wasn't a crane there with another building. We just kept growing and growing and growing and growing and growing until people started cutting, the cable cord. That kind of changed the trajectory of all of cable TV. And I remember seeing him say, "Man, I really enjoy you." And I could see the appreciation in his eyes. He's kind of a Midwest kid like I am. He was Chicago, same age, so we're contemporaries. We listen to the same music. We, speak the same sports language. And so it was really cool. That moment, I can still remember the appreciation of it, as I told him, "Man, I'm a big fan." And then to work with him on the first Sports Center night. And then again, those last couple of years when he was battling cancer, and during the commercial, he would just sit back and close his eyes just to try to rest, to get the energy to come back on camera again. His body is wasting away. Try to grab some hot tea in between the commercial breaks. And just as, again, never complained, never mentioned it. Really, really something. But again, that's from my generation. That's the generation I understand. And so, yeah, all those little moments at the very beginning. He was there at the beginning, and he was there at the very end. It's in a lot of ways, my Sports Center years were, my prime Sports Center years were kind of bookended with Stuart.
And it's your last night at ESPN doing a Sports Center. If you could pick your panel, who are you working with?
That'd be fun. Well, my boys, obviously John Anderson just retired, but Levy, Van Pelt, Anderson, Stewart, those are the people of my generation. We're similar age, similar sensibilities. Me and Anderson grew up on Letterman. We were Letterman guys, and so that kind of writing, we kind of pushed each other. He's certainly one of the best writers, maybe if not the best writer in Sports Center history, along with Oberman. And so he really pushed me, and I know at times I could see him listening to my lead-in or watching me, and being respect from him, which was big. So yeah, and again, just laughing with Steve Levy, and just we went through a divorce together, both at the same time. We really became brothers at that point. Again, Van Pelt, we would do Sports Center, and Twitter seemed to come alive. They felt like it was like kind of an event. We really really made it a fun kind of show like that. And I wish we could have done more, but then he went to radio, and then now he has his own show, which he has done every now and then, which I'm very flattered and love what he does. So yeah, those are kind of my guys. And I'm doing Sports Center with all those years for the last, like I said, 28 for me. Van Pelt got there a little bit after. Anderson got there a little bit after. Levy was there a little before me, but basically all the same time.
All right, and last question for you. As a play-by-play guy now, you can call one game. What's the arena? Who are the two teams?
Yeah, it would probably be a Bruins-Montreal game. I've never been to a Montreal game. I can't believe I could drive there. It's 5 hours away. But to call a Bruins-Canadiens game in the Bell Center would be my pick. I don't think we've even done a game in Montreal in our 3 years of doing ESPN hockey so far. I hope that changes this year. We've done a couple Leafs games. The first year we didn't do any Canadian because we know we don't get the rating. But then they realized streaming's different, and we threw on a McDavid game in year two. I was doing it against the Buffalo Sabres, and it was the highest streaming event of the week. They got like 300,000 streams. They're like, whoa! I guess hockey fans will find McDavid. So now McDavid and Austin Matthews, they become regulars on regular season games.
Right.
And so now as Montreal is slowly start to build their way back up from the bottom of the league, hopefully we can add one. And it'd be nice to add a Bruin-Montreal game. Again, if they did a Bruin-Montreal game on ESPN Plus, it would get good numbers. It would get a higher than normal plus rating. So and they never asked for my opinion, but I would recommend that game.
He is John Buccigross. He is on ESPN frequently, thankfully. As a hockey fan, as a sports fan, we are grateful to have him. I hope you will come back and join us in the middle of the season. We can actually talk about what's going on in the season, some of the stories. It's great to see your face, and it's really enjoyable to hear some of the stories we've tried for a while. Thank you for making some time, and I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you very much, Jonah. A lot of fun.
Hope you enjoyed today's episode of In the Press Row with John Buccigross. He was fantastic. Lots of great insights. Hope you will come back and join us in the future, hopefully in the middle of the season. If you want to appear in the press row, or you know somebody who does, or you'd like to advertise, please feel free to reach out to me. It's jonah@yyzsportsmedia.com or on any of the social media channels. Again, it's usually at YYZ Sports Media. My direct messages are open. At the same time, you can follow here on YouTube or wherever you listen to a podcast. And we will see you next time in the press row. Thank you very much.